So Professor, tell me about your students.
So my students are mostly non-majors. For many of them, this is the first and only political science course that they're actually going to take. Most of them actually have very little interest in international current events. Therefore, they come to the course with essentially zero prior knowledge about international relations.
Okay. What kinds of challenges does this create for both you and your students?
Well, the challenge is that I can't really assume that they know anything about a particular concept or situation that's introduced. So I spend a lot of class time explaining things like from the very beginning.
Okay. Can you give me an example of that?
Well, aside from the very basics, they don't really have an understanding of global conflicts. So not only do they not know that there is a civil war going on in Syria, but they can't even find Syria on the map. Geography is a real struggle with these students. We spend a lot of time looking at maps.
Okay. And how does your current textbook help to address this lack of geography knowledge?
To be honest, I don't even think that there's a map of the world in the book that I'm currently using. I really have to supplement all of that myself.
Okay, if you could incorporate additional resources in your book to help boost geography skills, what would those look like?
Well, a map would be nice. But more than that, it would be good to have some straightforward discussion of why geography matters. Geography plays such a big role in international conflict. I wish my book did a better job of explaining that.
In addition to geography, what else do you have to supplement?
So as I mentioned, they have very little interest in following international current events prior to taking the course. So we end up spending a lot of time discussing and dissecting current events in the course. A lot of my prep time is spent incorporating information and data about major international conflicts. It actually takes a lot of time.
It sounds like your current book doesn't really do a lot to address this challenge, is that right?
Yeah, that's definitely right. There's coverage of current events and conflicts, but the coverage tends to be really long, overly complex. I suspect that my students skim over those sections, so I always anticipate taking more class time to explain them, again, from the very beginning.
Okay. And what sort of resources, both in and out of the text, would help you address this issue?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, if it's in the book, it needs to be short and to the point. It needs to be really simplified and provide an opportunity for students to apply what they've learned. Otherwise, all of the supplementary resources that I pull into my classroom, like PowerPoints and news coverage, would need to be super current and up to date. Currency is really important, and that's pretty much why I end up just doing it all myself. I find that like most publisher-provided resources tend to get outdated really quickly.
So tell me, in addition to what we've talked about, what is another big challenge that you and your students currently face in this course?
Well, I would say that one of the biggest challenges is really getting the students to understand the why, right? Why things happen in IR. I mean, in some ways it's easy to get them to memorize a bunch of facts about various international political situations, in other words, the what. But to get them to understand why things happen is really a challenge. We use theory to do this, but theory can become dry and downright intimidating for the students.
And how do you currently overcome this?
Well, it's all about helping them to make kind of like a personal connection to the concepts, connecting with it in a way that helps them to make sense of it. I think it's easier to actually do this in American government than it is in IR. In IR, there's just like more of a disconnect.
And how does your book help them make this connection?
Well, my current book tries to use theory to help break down the why and the how, but to be honest, a lot of it goes just over my students' heads. I try and break down specific international situations in class, and we dissect a lot of current events, but it's sort of missing from the book.